Everyone, and welcome back to this lesson. So the last lesson we were able to see how sorting can be done on object arrays using an example to demonstrate how that can be achieved. And you will notice that in that example there was something that seems like you just introduced it, which was this part, the compared function that we used when working with object array. So the part of a dot here and minus b dot here. Now, if you remember that from last lesson, I said I was going to talk about this last part of the slide. When sorting objects, JavaScript needs a compare function that tells it which object property to compare and how to order the numbers. Don't forget that objects deals with properties. So, for example, that's the type and the years are properties of that object, which happens to be the element of the array. So JavaScript needs a way to compare the properties and how to order the numbers. And that was the reason for the introduction of that a dot here and a dot and b dot here that you saw right on the screen, which means that you compare the year of the first object property with the next one, and so on and so forth. So even if you have more than 3 elements in that array that happens to be object array, that is how JavaScript will continue to follow the sequence until it reaches the end of your object array. So that was that is that about working with sorting object arrays. Now, another aspect here that I want to talk about is that when you want to compare string properties, don't forget I've just compared number properties using the year. Now, when you want to compare string properties, it's a little more complex than what we saw just now, and I am going to show you an example of why that looks more complex. Now, string properties are compared alphabetically using the less than sign and the greater than sign, and we return -1, 1 or 0. So sort method knows which object comes first. So when you are comparing string, so JavaScript will use alphabets to compare each string using the 2 sign of greater than or less than, and so the output will either be negative, 0 or positive. So depending on the outcome, that is what the sort will now use to arrange objects and choose which to come first, which to stay in the middle, and which to come last. So let's quickly take a look at an example of how you can compare string properties. So the same example that I already have here is what I'm going to use. So I have cars as my array, and then it has properties of type and year. So again, to show the original array, so I'll call a function which I'm going to make later, and then after this function I want to add this. So my code will work without it just for clarity. So now let me make the first function here, because I'm going to need 2 functions in this particular example. So the first function, now I'm going to pass in the sort method to my array, and the way I want to sort is that I want to make another compare function inside this. Don't forget that you need compare function when you are working with maybe number value or numeric value, because of the fact that by default the sort method compares string and not numbers. With numbers, without compare function, it will give you an incorrect result. But with compare function, then you instruct it on what you want it to sort and how you want it to go about it. So that's the purpose of this function that you see me repeating every time in the code. So now, because JavaScript is case sensitive, capital V is not the same as small letter v. You know, this time I want to compare string, so I want to first convert it to lowercase, so as not to run into that string issue problem. Then I will make another one, so which means the first A will represent one car and the next A will represent another car. Then I can use conditional statements to say, okay, if x is less than y, I want you to return -1, which means I want it to return a negative value. And if it returns a negative value, it means that x will come before y. But if x is greater than y, return 1, which is a positive value, which simply means that if this is what happens, then x will come after y. Then if nothing changes, return 0, which is the default, that if nothing changes, let the order stays the same, make it default. And so in order to capture the result of my sort, then I'll call my function again here, because of the fact that I have sorted through it now. And so in order to be able to get a result, I need to call it again. And now I can make my function for display car, which is here, display cars. And what we do inside my display car, I want to output my result of get element by hiding. Then, like I did the other time, cars, using the position 0 dot type plus space. And then I can do for the second one, and I can as well do for the third one. And if you look at my screen, you will notice something, that even with this method, I'm still getting the correct order, which means the sorting is still actually correct, because 2015 comes before 2020 and 2020 comes before 2025. So this is how you do you compare string properties when you are working with object arrays in JavaScript. So don't be confused about what we have right here on the screen. Once you just go through it and you pay attention, then you understand it. So this is the array, and this is the function we are calling for the original arrays that we have here. Then we make a function. This function is our compare function, and inside it we converted each of the elements into lowercase, because that is what we want the compare function to compare. So we don't want case insensitivity issue. That's why we compare we convert each to lowercase, both the first car and the next one that JavaScript we use to compare. And then here a conditional statement that if x is less than 1, return negative value. If x is greater than 1, return positive value. If nothing changes, return 0. And so for this one, if a negative value is returned, x will come before y. If a positive value is returned, then x will come after y. And if nothing changes, the order will stay the same. Then a function to update what we have just done after sorting. I call the function again here, and then we now made the function. And inside this function, we are just using the index position of each of the type and year of the vehicle to get out what we want from the code. So this is how you can compare string property, even though it's a bit more complex than the way we did for the direct object. So comparing string property is a little more complex, and they are compared alphabetically, which means that JavaScript understand how to compare each of those elements one after the other. Thank you, and I'll see you in the